Hey people, get ready to crush everyday TOEFL iBT tests for all modules and make your dreams come true. I'm your motivator and I'll be guiding you through the test prep videos. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe or you'll be missing out on some serious preparation.
Do you prefer studying alone or in groups? Explain why. Begin speaking now.
I prefer study alone. When I study alone, I can focus better. If I study with group, sometimes my friends talk about other things and I cannot concentrate. Also, I can make my own schedule. I study when I want, like late at night. I don't need to wait for other people. One time I study with my classmate and we spend many time talking, not studying. So I think study alone is better for me. It helped me learn faster and I feel more comfortable. That is why I like study alone more than study in groups.
I prefer studying alone because it helps me concentrate more effectively. When I'm by myself, I can control my environment and focus without distractions. For example, in the library I can choose a quiet spot and study at my own pace. Additionally, studying alone allows me to organize my time better. I don't have to coordinate schedules with other people, which can be complicated. When I studied for my chemistry exam last semester, I made a detailed study plan by myself and got a high score. Of course, group study can be helpful sometimes for discussing difficult concepts, but overall I find that studying alone is more productive and suits my learning style better.
Personally, I strongly prefer studying independently, primarily because it allows me to engage in deep, focused learning without interruption. When I study alone, I can tailor my approach to suit my specific needs, spending extra time on concepts I find challenging while moving quickly through material I already understand. Last year, while preparing for my biology finals, I developed a personalized review system using flashcards and timed practice tests, which proved far more efficient than the group sessions I had attended previously. Furthermore, solitary study cultivates self-discipline and critical thinking skills that are invaluable in any academic context. While collaborative learning certainly has merit for brainstorming, I find that my comprehension and retention are significantly stronger when I can work through ideas systematically on my own terms.
Effective fall semester 2026, Westfield University will eliminate all printed course materials, including syllabi, textbooks, and in-class handouts. All course content will be delivered exclusively through the university's online learning portal. This initiative supports the university's sustainability goals and is projected to reduce paper waste significantly while cutting printing costs by an estimated $2 million annually. Faculty members are required to upload all digital materials at least 1 week prior to each class session. Students who require accommodations due to limited technology access should contact the Office of Student Services. Printed materials will no longer be available at the campus bookstore or library print stations beginning August 2026. Two students, Marcus and Elena, discussed the announcement outside the Student Center on the first day of the fall semester. Marcus strongly disagrees with the university's decision. He argues first that reading from screens for extended periods causes serious eye strain, making it harder to study and annotate materials effectively compared to physical texts. Second, he contends that not all students own reliable laptops or have stable internet access at home, meaning the policy unfairly disadvantages students from lower-income backgrounds. Elena sees some merit in the environmental goals but ultimately agrees the rollout feels rushed. The student expresses an opinion about the university's announcement. State his opinion and explain the reasons he gives for holding that opinion. Begin speaking now.
The man thinks the announcement is bad idea. He don't like that university will stop printing materials for students. He says it is hard to read on computer for long time because his eyes hurt. Also he say some students maybe don't have good computer or internet at home, so it is not fair for everybody. The woman think maybe it is okay for environment, but the man still disagree with the school. He want the university to keep printing papers for class. I think his reasons is make sense because many students have problem with reading online. The university should think more about students before they make this big change.
The male student disagrees with the university's decision to eliminate printed course materials. He provides two main reasons to support his opinion. First, he argues that reading digital materials for long periods of time causes eye strain, which makes it difficult to study effectively. He also mentions that physically annotating printed texts is much easier than using digital tools. Second, he points out that not all students have equal access to reliable technology, such as updated laptops or high-speed internet at home. This means the policy could put students from lower-income backgrounds at a disadvantage. Although the university argues the change will save money and help the environment, the man believes these benefits do not outweigh the negative effects on students' learning.
The male student expresses strong opposition to the university's announcement eliminating all printed course materials. He supports his position with two well-developed arguments. First, he contends that prolonged screen reading causes significant eye strain and physical discomfort, which undermines students' ability to concentrate and study effectively. He further notes that physically annotating printed pages is far more intuitive and efficient than navigating digital annotation tools, giving printed materials a clear pedagogical advantage. Second, he raises a compelling equity concern, arguing that the policy disproportionately disadvantages students who lack access to reliable devices or stable internet connections, particularly those from economically disadvantaged households. While he acknowledges the university's environmental and financial motivations as stated in the announcement, he firmly believes the administration has prioritized institutional cost-cutting over the genuine academic needs and well-being of its student population.
Symbiosis is a long-term biological interaction between two different species living in close physical association. Biologists classify symbiotic relationships into three main categories based on how each organism is affected. In mutualism, both species benefit from the relationship. In commensalism, one species benefits while the other is neither helped nor harmed. In parasitism, one organism, the parasite, benefits at the expense of the host, which is harmed. Symbiotic relationships are fundamental to ecosystems, shaping species evolution and maintaining ecological balance across virtually every habitat on Earth. A biology professor elaborates on symbiosis by presenting the relationship between clownfish and sea anemones as a vivid real-world example of mutualism, explaining precisely how each organism gains from the partnership. The professor describes how clownfish live among the stinging tentacles of sea anemones, which would paralyze other fish but do not harm the clownfish due to a protective mucus coating. The clownfish benefit by gaining shelter and leftover food scraps from the anemone, while the anemone benefits because the clownfish drives away predatory fish that would otherwise eat it and also improves water circulation around the anemone by swimming. The professor emphasizes this as a textbook example of mutualism because both organisms clearly gain a survival advantage from the relationship. Using the example from the lecture, explain the concept of symbiosis as described in the reading. Begin speaking now.
The reading says symbiosis is when two different animals live together for a long time. There are three types: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. The professor talks about clownfish and sea anemone. The clownfish lives in the anemone and the anemone helps the clownfish. Both of them get benefit, so this is mutualism. The professor said clownfish has special mucus so the anemone doesn't hurt it.
According to the reading, symbiosis refers to a long-term interaction between two different species, and it can be categorized as mutualism, commensalism, or parasitism depending on how each species is affected. The professor illustrates mutualism using the example of clownfish and sea anemones. The clownfish is protected from the anemone's stinging tentacles because of a special mucus on its body, and it gains shelter and food from the anemone. In return, the clownfish protects the anemone from predators and helps circulate water around it. Since both organisms benefit, this is a clear example of the mutualistic type of symbiosis described in the reading.
The reading defines symbiosis as a sustained biological interaction between two distinct species, classifying it into mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism based on whether each organism benefits, is unaffected, or is harmed. The professor uses the relationship between clownfish and sea anemones to illustrate mutualism, the most cooperative category. Specifically, the clownfish possesses a protective mucus coating that renders it immune to the anemone's paralyzing tentacles, allowing it to dwell safely among them and access food scraps the anemone leaves behind. Simultaneously, the clownfish actively defends the anemone against predatory fish and enhances water circulation by swimming near its tentacles, thereby improving the anemone's oxygen supply. Because both organisms derive clear survival advantages from this arrangement, the professor presents it as a definitive example of mutualistic symbiosis, perfectly embodying the reciprocal benefit the reading describes.
A geology professor delivers a lecture explaining how sedimentary rocks are formed, focusing on two key processes, weathering and erosion followed by compaction and cementation, and provides specific real-world examples such as sandstone and limestone to illustrate each stage. The professor begins by explaining that sedimentary rock formation starts when existing rocks are broken down into small particles called sediments through weathering and erosion, giving the example of wind and water wearing down granite into sand grains that are then transported by rivers to lakes or ocean floors. The professor then describes how, over millions of years, successive layers of sediment pile up and the weight of upper layers compresses the lower ones, a process called compaction, followed by cementation, in which mineral-rich water fills the spaces between particles and hardens them into solid rock such as sandstone. As a second example, the professor explains that limestone forms differently, from the accumulation of calcium carbonate shells and skeletal remains of marine organisms that compact and cement on the seafloor, illustrating that the type of sedimentary rock depends on the source material deposited. Using points and examples from the lecture, explain sedimentary rock formation. Begin speaking now.
The professor explains how sedimentary rocks are made. First, rocks break into small pieces called sediments by wind and water. Then the sediments go to the bottom of rivers or ocean. After that, the layers become heavy and press together. This is called compaction. Then minerals fill the spaces and make rock. The example is sandstone. Also, limestone is made from shells of animals in the sea. These are two examples of sedimentary rocks.
According to the professor, sedimentary rocks form through a multi-step process. First, existing rocks are broken down into small particles called sediments through weathering and erosion caused by wind and water. The professor uses granite as an example, explaining that it weathers into sand grains that rivers carry to ocean floors or lakes. Over time, layers of sediment build up, and the pressure from upper layers compresses the lower ones in a process called compaction. Then, mineral-rich water moves through the sediment and hardens the particles together through cementation, creating rocks like sandstone. The professor also mentions limestone, which forms from accumulated shells of marine animals rather than rock fragments, showing that the source material determines the type of sedimentary rock produced.
The professor explains that sedimentary rock formation is a gradual, multi-stage process driven first by the breakdown of pre-existing rocks and then by the consolidation of the resulting particles. In the initial stage, processes of weathering and erosion, powered by agents such as wind and water, fragment existing rocks like granite into tiny sediment particles, which are then transported by rivers and deposited on lake beds or ocean floors. As sediment continues to accumulate over millions of years, the increasing weight of successive layers exerts intense pressure on the material below, squeezing out water and air in a process the professor calls compaction. Subsequently, mineral-laden water percolates through the compressed sediment, precipitating minerals that bind individual grains together through cementation, ultimately producing a solid rock such as sandstone. The professor further illustrates that not all sedimentary rocks originate from eroded rock fragments. Limestone, for instance, forms from the gradual accumulation and cementation of calcium carbonate shells and skeletal remains of marine organisms on the seafloor. This second example underscores the professor's broader point that the composition and origin of the deposited material fundamentally determine what type of sedimentary rock is eventually produced.
Hey people, how was your test? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or you'll be missing out on some serious fun. See you tomorrow!